It is. I'm just walking through this big house. No, that's the office. So go ahead. A certain kind of what? I'm sorry, a certain. Oh, these are contact air bags. Yes, I've got one too. Yes, with our, I have Toyota. They don't have Takatas. And yeah, so those are dealers, those are dealer recalls. You can use Takata or whatever the model is. Because those are not fail safe. So they're recalling them all. Should be at no expense to you. Any of us. Probably both. Probably both. Potentially both. Certainly Yates, because hers is old enough. Yours is pretty new. So maybe not. But I would check. There's something interesting. I would Google it. Takata recall and your model, your number model. Anyway, yeah, I'll do it. You just get this up with the service 206, 2006 model years. We'll find out later. The year I lost it on the CR3. CR3. But it's pretty recently. It wasn't just a few years. And yeah, that's probably their class action lawsuit. Probably taken care of as far as I'm concerned, but it's still so take it out of what works. Yeah, that may be, and you get coupons for about $13, and the lawyers will get about 100 million or something. So you can.
How you doing? Hi, Michael. How you doing? Hanging in there? You're a little stressed. You stressed? Not really. No, I'm okay. You all right? Yeah. Not any more stressed than normal. I think she answered the phone yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, looky who's here. Oh, hey. I keep forgetting that streams. I like to come over, sort of feel like it sort of keeps me, when you don't really come into the office every day like I used to. I feel like it connects me a little bit, you know, at least for now. Later. Exactly. But for now, you know.
Gotta grab that.
Yeah, yeah. Says this kind of like that.
Pardon?
This is an IKEA commercial. You ever seen this? I'm sure I have. What's that? How's this IKEA? In a minute. It's pretty good. Hey, Bob. John. Jesus. Somebody had a great imagination there.
So canal must be, what is canal? Is it
I think it must be this guy. It must be the guy in it that, you know, the little star of it. I think he's like a budding screenwriter, so he did this commercial to sort of send to IKEA and say, hey, I'd like to do this. I don't know. It must have, because it kind of looks like it, probably over in Europe, you know, because it was obviously subtitled. How did you get here? Pretty good. Sounds like a Walking Dead. Yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
So I'm sorry, I missed the big celebration yesterday. I was just telling you.
Well, Charlie spoke for a few minutes on valedictorian.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys have on this. You are old school.
I thought his remarks were on point. It was perfect.
This guy's
improvement.
Breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys had a good class. So yeah, it's like, yeah, sharpening axes, and eventually you're gonna get out there and cut some trees, and you know, it's slow to the party. But yeah, it may be over now. It's winter, things are cooling off, so you got to hustle a little more. But it's actually the greatest time to prospect for listings you want to put on the market in the spring, because now you got 3 or 4 months to get it ready.
You know, I called it home inspection. What's going on?
Is he busy?
I'm busier than I've ever been in December.
Oh,
I can't really help you on the, you know, telling you why, because I'm brand new.
Well,
but
it's interesting.
he said I'm busier than I've ever been in December.
That's awesome.
Who's that? Jim Quisenberry with Cavalier Home Inspections. you know, I said, well, I
That's
don't
a
know why,
market
but I guess
indicator.
it's a good thing. For both of us.
Well, yeah, it was interesting when I was showing my kids around Great Falls. There was like 4 or 5 houses here. Within 2 weeks, everyone has been sold.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what it was. They were sitting on the market for months, but all of a sudden,
Yeah,
people come out of the woodwork.
It's going to ground.
don't have to wait to compare it, but he's.
I don't know, near deal was this way. Everybody's Christmas present.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need a ski place, great ski place. Early American example of 19th century Americana. That's unfortunate.
Julie talked to me about doing an open house for you guys.
Oh, please. That'd be awesome.
I was just looking at this, I was just looking on. Not sure why these houses go.
She's,
Pretty neat, isn't it?
my job is defending the price. It assesses in Augusta County, so you're just on the west side of the line. It's Blue Ridge Parkway. I mean, yeah, the old Appalachian Trail abutted the property, but when Wintergreen took it over, they moved it to the west of the Blue Ridge Parkway. So first, it's a long forested. It's the property on the edge of the Wintergreen properties. Above, if you drive the cliffside above Stewart's Draft and Sharando, there's about a 20 or 30 foot cliff before you get to Wintergreen, and that's those properties built on the backside of the mountain.
But I noticed that you said school was Stewart's Draft. So it must be Augusta County.
Well, if you're looking to get away and hide from somebody, this is fine.
That's right. I'm thinking of it since my first plant, and I got to move on. It's, you know, the first plant's great and all. I could need 1,000 plant.
1,000 persons.
But the first one was a couple of retired CIA analysts who were in academia. The buyer came out of the blue, provided by a Montague Miller agent who originally had the listing. And this guy called out of the blue. I picked up the phone and he said, I got a 45 acres in near Livingston in the mountains that I need sold because my wife's going to divorce me and I'm here to help. And,
I'm your man.
and so I didn't say that, but
And I do divorces too. in case you can't. Real estate, no fault. $200. So either way, I'm your guy.
no, so,
That's pretty neat looking place, isn't it?
yeah, it's beautiful. And the odd part, the really serendipitous part is this place was built 2 years before I went to work with that guy building that sort of building in '87 when my 30-year-old was born. I was doing stonemasonry. So that has stone foundation and stone fireplaces and chimneys.
Who built this?
Mac McCraven.
Okay.
He's out of Free Union. He's an Episcopal or Presbyterian minister now.
Oh, really?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
I don't know, I printed that thing out. Good morning, if anybody's joining us on, I know Yona was at least going to try to join remotely if you're there. We're glad you're here. And I don't know, I printed these things up, but I don't know why they printed scattered, but I think I've got them in the right order now, so we'll hope that that's the case. We are continuing through talking about the listing. And we've spent a great deal of time talking about the things that you need to do to prepare for a listing. Last week we talked about pricing. So if you missed any of those, obviously you can go to the YouTube channel and click on and watch those. Chris emails them out every time so that you've got the handouts, but you also got the handouts obviously in the roadmap for success as well. So you got a hard copy of that. But what we're going to do today is actually go through the listing agreement. So, you know, and we'll get back into how to prospect for listings and things like that. But, you know, we've talked about all different things. If you get the opportunity to go get a listing, we've talked about all those different things. We've talked about the pricing, but we haven't really talked about the paperwork. And obviously you need to be able to explain the paperwork. If you're sitting in front of somebody and says, yeah, everything you told me is great, marketing that you're going to do for me, both online and in print media through Ray Wheeler, that's great. You know, everything you've presented to me, whether it be the listing handbook brochure or the digital listing presentation that Chris has made available, all that looks great. I'm ready to go. Where do I sign? Okay. So that's what we want to do today is is kind of talk about the actual forms and how to go about getting them signed, but also once you get them signed, how you process them here at the office and that kind of thing. Again, the nice thing is, as it relates to contracts, Justine has come in as a client care coordinator and is doing a phenomenal job for some of the agents to take that on for a cost. And we sent that email out a couple weeks ago. But you can reach out to Justine in regards to that. Justine and I met the other day, and she's now looking at trying to put it in place for the listings as well, because it's really, if she's going to process your contract once you get a contract on a listing, she's going to need to put all this information together anyway to actually help you process through to settlement on a listing, just as she processes through on a buyer. So she's trying to put that together right now, and hopefully we'll get that out to you guys here soon. But when somebody says, yes, I'm ready to go, this is the actual, this is what you're going to use. You can do it, obviously, transaction desk or whatever. But the hard copy is here in the office. It's also on Dropbox. If you haven't learned how to sign into Dropbox, please get with Mary or Chris and do that, because all the forms are there, as well as, you know, Roy Wheeler specific forms that are all there for your enjoyment and pleasure. You obviously can get the hard copies here in the office. They're on every floor, but when you're out and about, it's nice to be able to get your hands on these things. So when you sit down with a seller, you're going to start with this exclusive authorization to sell. One thing I always just like to remember, and when we go through the actual process of paperwork, the exclusive authorization to sell is exactly like the exclusive authorization, you becoming an exclusive representative to buy. The language is the same. Obviously, one's pointed toward the purchaser. One's pointed toward the purchaser, and obviously the other one's pointed toward the seller. And quite honestly, it's more natural to sit down and go over these forms with a seller who said, yes, I'm ready to go, versus having to go through these forms when you have somebody who says, I'm interested in buying a house. It just makes sense that I've got, I've got forms for you to fill out to talk about what we're going to do, and we're going to represent you and that kind of thing. But it's no different with a buyer. When a buyer says, hey, I'm interested in buying a house for you, we should be sitting down and talking to them and explaining the exclusive right to represent agreement, just as we explain the exclusive authorization to sell. When does it start? And we'll talk about this as we go through. When does it start? When does it end? What am I going to do for you? What am I going to expect for you to do for me? How am I going to get paid? So what's the compensation look like? And obviously the proper names and everything at the top, and the proper signatures affixed at the bottom. Either way, you need to know who are the people who are to sign that properly. When you have a listing agreement, you may be meeting with one or two people, and it may turn out that there's 3 or 4 family members that all have to sign. Most times, if it's an estate or a trust, somebody has become the executor, and that executor has the ability to sign for everybody else. But sometimes that's not the case, and you may think you've got a listing, but you don't, because you don't have all the people who have an ownership in that property signing it. One of the first things that you can see when you're preparing to do your listing presentation is when you go on the land records, and if it says ETAL or ETUX, that means there are other people somewhere. If it says trust, the trust of, or whatever, that says, okay, I gotta see some paperwork that substantiates that you are the signatory, the person who's authorized to sign these things. And the last thing you want to do is think that you've got something going, and you start to get it out there, and all of a sudden there's somebody else saying, no, we're not interested in selling the property.
A sibling, typically, or parent-child scenario.
Divorce situation, yes. So somebody they own that property as a tenancy in its entirety, and they're both still alive, and they haven't worked that out in their separation or divorce agreement. One person said, I'd really like to sell that 150 acres, and do something else with it. The other person
It's
says, no, I
perfectly
don't
legal
want to.
for him to market it through you and do all that, but if you don't know it until, it comes to the signing, then you're in a jam.
Well, yes and no.
Agreements without the other owner.
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you don't know that there's another owner, you certainly think you're moving forward. You've got the listing agreement signed and you've got everything taken care of and you're putting the MLS or whatever. But once that other person or persons
Says no.
comes over the horizon, well, then you don't have a valid, and it immediately needs to be withdrawn and that kind of thing. So those are the, when you're, we talked about the process, the one step or the two-step process of the listing agreement. Another reason why is to walk through the house with somebody prior to doing the official listing presentation is not a bad idea, because you can say, I really appreciate the opportunity here. I'm looking forward to earning the right to be the realtor that you hire to market your house to get it sold.
That's a nice phrase, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm here to earn your business.
Yeah.
You're driving the train.
You're not assuming that it's going to be, I'm here to do this the right way. And I also like the marketing the house to get it sold, because a lot of people that talk about listing their house or they talk about marketing the house. But you want to communicate to them that, man, this is all about getting it sold and ultimately getting you to closing so that you can move on to do what else you want to do. But in that initial, whether it's a phone conversation or whether you're there walking through the house to find out, I noticed when in preparation for coming over here today, I looked at tax records and I noticed that at all is after your name. Are there other people that have ownership in this or whatever the case? And you're finding those things out. So, but the point being is that the agreements are very similar in the way they're broken down. One's just pointing to the purchaser, one's just pointing to the listing or the seller. But the point is the same. You need to, when does it start? When does it end? Who am I doing it with? Do I have the right people that can actually do what they want to do? What am I promising? And that's all the things we've talked about in the last couple of days, the 180 things that we have and listen that you can do for them. What am I promising as I market your house to get sold? What is it that I need from you? And we'll talk about that as we go through this. I think the listing agreement is a great way of using it kind of as an outline that you're walking through as you're doing your listing presentation. You're kind of walking them through the form, because then at the end, if they have had objections, you've handled them, and once you've handled them and you're moving forward to the next thing, by the time you get to the end, you've explained all that. So when they're ready to sign something, you don't have to go back through it again and explain it. But that's totally up to you as to what you're most comfortable with. The first thing you see here is this exclusive authorization to sell. This has just come about in the last couple, 3 years because the online aspect of marketing has become, you got the right page?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's just a stop page here.
Yeah, that, if you turn that over, I think it's going to say 606. Yeah, so put that in the back.
Okay.
That means I can give it to you right away. Anyway, because of online advertising, and more importantly, because of IDX, which stands for Information Data Exchange, the way that a property gets marketed now is very different than it was 10 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago. IDX changed everything. Once MLSs chose to allow their information to be exchanged, to be sent out to other third parties, we sort of lose control over the information, all right? So Charlie gets a listing. He puts it into the MLS. He gets it all set up and sends it in, and it's now an active listing. As soon as it becomes active, it goes out to Realtor.com. It goes out to Zillow. It goes out to Homes.com. It goes out to Gail Harvey Properties. It goes out to RoyWheeler.com. It goes.
Some of those firms incorporate it right into their own listing, so it seamlessly goes to Gail Harvey and then Roy Wheeler listing, I see. But
So what happens in that situation is it goes to Realtor.com, it goes to Zillow, those kind of places. And so anybody that's on those sites can find your listing, and it'll show you as the listing agent. I want just a caveat, a reminder. When you get a listing and you activate MLS, the first thing you want to do for yourself is go to Zillow and claim it. And Chris can teach you how to do it. The reason you want to do that is when you claim it, you are shown as the listing agent on Zillow, and then underneath it will be some other people who have paid to be there. Trulia Pro, Zillow Premier, or whatever. But if you're the listing agent, you don't have to pay to have your name there, but you do have to go in and claim it. If you don't claim it, then those agents are showing up, so your listing shows up on Zillow, and if you haven't paid to be there and you don't claim it, you're not going to show up over here on the right side. So as soon as you get one of those listings, you want to go into Zillow and claim it, and Chris obviously can help you do that. But the point being is, unless somebody chooses not to click the box, the IDX box, their listing is now going out. However, and quite honestly, in my opinion, it would be a disservice for us to not explain that and say to the seller, we need to click this box. And explain to them what Bob just said. There are going to be other real estate companies that listing's going to go on. They've paid to a third party to have those listings come onto their website. Gail Harvey is an example. And when you go on search listings, your listing is going to show up on her website. And it's going to show up, and some of them are very clever in making it look like they're all their properties.
Yeah.
Right? However, the regulations say that in that first click, there has to be something that says listed by Roy Wheeler, marketed by Roy Wheeler. It's got to show that that's not their
It's
listing.
usually our logo. It's not all,
Whatever, but the point is, some of them are really good at disguising it, and most consumers just don't understand that. They go on that and they think they're their listings, and they have every right to. It's not anything that they're doing, incorrectly.
It's also, it's off the point, but it's a marketing aspect of a new agent's career. If you find listings you really like that other firms have, you want to incorporate them into your website the same way. Go at it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. When you think about 85–95% of people starting their searches on the web, you've got to put yourself in a position where somehow, some way they're finding you. Especially if you have your own listings and things, you want to market those as best as you can. You want to own up your agent profile at Roy Wheeler. So if they come to the roywheeler.com site and go to agents, they start reading through those and say, hey, I want to reach out to Charlie, or reach out to John because of something that they read in your profile. As you get testimonials about your work, as an example, Charlie, when this closes up in Northern Virginia, to ask Susie to send something about how she enjoyed working with you or whatever, that comes in here. Chris immediately takes that and posts it onto your agent profile so that somebody goes on there, it shows that kind of stuff. But the point being is, because of all that, we need to talk about it with the seller. They need to understand it. The best example of where I don't mind this being public on YouTube, but Wintergreen Real Estate was a great example of this. Frank Hardy is a great example of this. Frank Hardy oftentimes doesn't click the box. He wants all the inquiries to come from Frank Hardy so that he can try to sell both sides of the equation, right? And I don't know how he explains it to the seller as to why the seller says, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. But somehow he does. And for years, Wintergreen Real Estate would not click that IDX box. And so people, when they went to the Wintergreen Real Estate website, the only listings they thought were on the mountain were theirs. And so they I'd like to see this house, and they go and buy it. And then when they're moving in, the neighbor comes over and says, hey, welcome neighbor, good to have you here. And how long are you here? Oh, well, I just moved in a month ago. I said, well, this house was for sale? Yeah, we bought it through Mountain Area or Wintergreen Resort Premier Properties or Four Seasons. They never even knew it was on because at Wintergreen there are no signs, right?
That's
There are no for sale signs.
against it, don't you think?
Well, here's the point. The point being is, in their opinion, it didn't work against them because they were controlling their listings and having first shot at selling them, all right? So, 10 years ago, Wintergreen Resort Premier Properties, we come on the mountain and we open up the mountain because in the Mountain Inn office, we had a package of information about every listing that was on the market, regardless if it was ours or anybody else's. They'd come in and we'd hand that to them and say, hey, drive around, take a look. If you're interested in seeing anything, we'd love to have you. Plus, on the Wintergreen Resort website, when somebody went in and clicked, sellers started saying to Wintergreen Real Estate, why isn't my listing showing up on the Wintergreen Resort website? And the reason is because they hadn't clicked the IDX button. And they had to explain that to their sellers. Well, obviously the sellers didn't like it because finally, a few years ago, they clicked the button. And so now all the listings, are on there that weren't before.
Wasn't Mountain Area Realty doing the same thing, kind of?
Probably, to accept it. They didn't push it as long. Now, what Mountain Area did is when we came on the mountain, in whatever that was, 06, fall of 06, yeah. They sued us, and they sued us for antitrust situations. Yeah, they sued us saying that we were going to lock up the mountain, and they were not going to be able to play anymore. What actually happened was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
We came on the mountain and we opened it up, and it allowed agents from like Charlottesville to, well, you guys were just talking about. Back in the day, Charlottesville agents would even try to go on the mountain to sell anything because they didn't know what was on the market. And Wintergreen Real Estate and to an extent Mountain Area, same thing. They didn't want anybody to know what was on the market because they wanted to control that. So what ultimately ended up happening is they sued us, but it got, after a lot of money being paid to lawyers, it got thrown out of court as an unjustified suit because we were able to substantiate that, our business plan only showed us having 25% of the market. We substantiated what we had done to open up the market versus keep it tight. But anyway, the bottom line is that the seller has to click a box or give the company permission to click a box to send their listing out. In my opinion, there are only very few exceptions as to why I never advise a seller not to do that. And it may be because of, whatever, privacy scenario or whatever the case may be, but very few. So this is just, on the front page of the listing agreement, this is just to say, hey, we're going to, section 7, we're going to be talking about this, and that you're going to need to initially decide the appropriate response, and terms and definitions, property reviews, blogging. Some websites allow third parties to publish commentary, estimate of market value. We're, again, like the agency law, we're held responsible for what we can control versus what we can't control. The agency law says we're only responsible for what we do know versus what we should have known or could have known. This talks about the fact that there are places this is going to go that we don't have control over. Somebody posting something over here, we're not an administrator of that. And therefore, we can't control that. So that's why there's this page right up in front to tell them about that. We turn the page from there, we get to page 1 of 6. And then we start getting into what I was talking about before, the different sections. This agreement is made as of December 12th between who? The owners. Well, do we have the proper owners, listed here? So important. The broker obviously is a realty company. In consideration of services rendered by the broker, the owner grants the broker the exclusive and irrevocable right to sell certain real estate and all improvements thereon, which is owned by owner, and which is hereby described all herewith called party during the period commencing on. All right, so you may have made this on December 12th, but maybe it's not going to commence until December 15th. But it's going to commence on a certain date, and it's going to expire at midnight on a certain date, the initial period of time for the price of. And in most situations, you will have determined what the price is going to be by the time you get to this. Sometimes not. And when it isn't, then you're going to put in here with an asterisk to be determined. And you're going to get sellers to initial that. And to be determined would be that you're getting the listing agreement signed, but you're still not quite sure what the price is going to be. And you're going to get a bunch of agents in to look at it and give you, broker price opinions. And after that, you're going to sit down with the seller and you're going to decide a price. That would be an example of where you would put an asterisk in there and just say to be determined. Another example would be that they're going to sell the house. John, this would take, we talked a little bit about this in regards to the one guy that you've talked to for Union. At some point or another, it might make sense to say, look, I know you're not ready yet, but you've told me that if somebody was willing to pay me X, that I might be interested in considering it. Well, in that situation, it may behoove you at some point to sit down with them and get the listing agreement signed. But it's not going to commence until the seller gives you, or it's not going to go into the MLS and be fully marketed until the seller gives you written permission. And what that does is allows you to talk to agents about it. And if there's somebody that's interested, you know that if they write a contract on it and they accept it, you're gonna get paid. What you don't want is to know at some point in whatever the future is, this person's gonna put their house on the market, and given market conditions, somebody sends them a letter. I just got one in the mail yesterday. Somebody sends them a letter, Still Meadows is a great place to live, looking for listings, you're thinking about selling, please call me, right? In the example I'm using, that person goes, oh, well, I may be interested in selling. So they call them, and the next thing you know, they bring a buyer to the house, they sell it, and you're out of it because you didn't have anything in place. Whereas if you can get this, even if it's a delayed scenario, dated December 12th commencing, and you put an asterisk there, and other terms you put, property will be marketed through MLS and other advertising purposes upon written notice from the seller. Well, now you have a valid listing agreement that will talk about how you get paid and whatever, even if it's 6 months, a year from now. So that when they get that kind of letter, they go, hey, John, I got this letter. This person has a buyer. Can you reach out to them as my agent and see if they're really real or not? Versus that person reaching out, the next thing you know, it's sold, because I never thought that somebody would just come by and say that they were interested in buying it. That makes sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so then you've got listing prices, and the price to be determined. Real property. The property is located in the city or county of blank and is described as follows. You're going to put there in the tax records, you're going to put the legal description in there if you have it, Block 2, Block 4, Section 7 of Still Meadows subdivision, or Lot 2A, Block 4, rural, whatever the tax records, the legal description is, that's what's going in there. And then, and more commonly known as, and then you're putting the actual address of the property. Now, some land doesn't have an address, so the legal description is going to suffice in that situation. But in most situations, you're going to have a legal description, and then you're going to have an address. Okay. Broker fee, important paragraph, obviously, because we want to get paid, but it's important because you need to be able to explain it. If the property is sold or exchanged by a broker or an owner with or without the assistance of a broker, within the initial period of time or any extension thereof, owner agrees to pay broker a fee of, all right? So in our situation, in most situations, that's 6%. In some land properties, we do 8% because it's usually less price and as much work and whatever. It used to be that land was 10, and residential 6. Well, slowly but surely, land has just come back to being just like anything else.
6?
In a lot of situations, I see it as low as 6. But 8 is in there. But the point being is, whatever it is, you're going to agree to pay a fee of blank. If within, and usually you're going to put this blank 30 days, and I'll explain that in a minute. After the expiration of the initial period of time or extension thereof, the property is sold or exchanged by broker, by owner, or by any other person to a purchaser or purchasers to whom the property was shown, offered, or introduced by the broker, or by any licensed broker or salesperson employed by or affiliated with broker, again, owner agrees to pay broker the fee. So all of that, if you've got a listing and it expires on April 30th, and sometime between April 30th and May 31st, somebody comes back and who's seen the property and wants to buy it, this stays in.
Is 30 days because I've always treated 90 days as sort of usual and customary for me, and everybody says fine.
If you can get 90, it's fine. I wouldn't do it for less than 30. The whole point of this is you don't want a seller to be ripping you off. And in at least 30 days, the seller's not going to, and it happens. The seller will call the buyer. They run across each other in an open house and say, hey, my listing expires in 15 days.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's just wait. And then we'll write an offer afterwards where I don't have to pay a commission, and we'll mutually benefit from that. That's the client that you don't really want to be working with, but sometimes you don't know that until it's so. Anyway, the normal is 30 days, and you're explaining to them that one, that if that happens, that you would be brought back into it and help the transaction get to closing and be paid accordingly.
That's only if it's somebody who's been in.
Yes.
That's right.
So if somebody brand new starts day one of the after the.
That's right. And the other thing, which is right after that, notwithstanding the foregoing, I love that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line. Notwithstanding the foregoing, so in other words, whatever happened before, the owner is not obligated to pay the fee to a broker if after the expiration of the initial period of time, so let's say it's April 30th, or any extension thereof, owner enters into an exclusive authorization to sell or exchange the property with a licensed broker or salesperson other than the broker or licensed broker or salesperson employed or affiliated with the broker, and the property is sold or exchanged pursuant to such exclusive authorization. So what that means, again, very long line is, it expires on April 30th. If they list with somebody else on May 1st, it doesn't matter who came in before.
Yep.
And they may, and it happens all the time, they come back in at May 1st and they lower the price, right, to what you told them it should be.
Yeah.
And then somebody that saw the property earlier sees that and comes back and makes an offer, you're out.
Yeah.
If there's a proper listing agreement signed after April 30th, they're not obligated to you in any way. Now, let's just, again, for the sake of discussion, practical application of all this. You've got no place. We've got a seller right now that we've done everything we could to sell their house and it just hasn't sold. It expires at the end of December. Let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that there's somebody that looked at it this weekend and says, we're interested in it, but we're not going to make a decision until February. Before it expires, you can go to that seller and say, look, I understand that you're, may list with another company. We've done everything we can. We can't imagine anybody can do any more than we can, but we understand that you might want to just make a change. And we know it expires on December 31st, but what we'd like is for you to, if you list it with somebody else, that you exclude this person and this agent. And if this person, this agent comes back and buys it in February, that we would be the ones who would be compensated on the listing side because they were introduced to the property. When they don't have to do it, but it's one of those questions that you might as well ask it. Especially if you're in good terms with the seller feels bad about the fact that it just hasn't worked and they just feel like they got to do something else. That oftentimes you can get that, and then when they go to the next agent, they say, look, we're going to list with you. However, we've got an exclusion or a couple people excluded out of this for 30 days or 45 days or whatever the case may be.
So if the listing expires, you've got that 30-day clause in there. If you are now going to be the person who's going to list that property, you really don't want to do it until 30 days after the other.
No, they can do it right away. The 30 days is only if it doesn't get listed.
Oh, okay.
The 30 days is for that time period if they don't list it again.
Okay.
If it's May 1st and they sign it, you're done. The 30 days is void. Yeah, you're out. Now, the other thing, again, this is why we teach this class this way. The other thing is to begin to develop relationships with other agents from other companies. One, that when you get a listing and you're not quite sure about the price, that you do a thing with 3 or 4 agents and say, hey, when you have a listing that you have a hard time pricing and you get it listed, before you put it on, I'm happy to come by and give you my opinion as to what it should be priced at and the things that they should do. And I would ask you to do the same, right? And so you not only are getting Roy Wheeler agent information, then you've got a few other agents from other companies, and that can be a differentiator when you're talking about getting a listing. You say, one of the things that I do is I've got a group of agents that once you sign the listing, I'm going to have in here, and they're going to give me information about condition and price and that kind of thing. And some of them will be Roy Wheeler agents, but some of them will be a network of brokers that I've connected with, right? And that's that's something other companies don't do. So that could be a differentiator in why they list with you versus somebody else. The other side of that is, using my example again, December 31st rolling around, you've got a good relationship with the seller. They feel bad that that they got to make a change. You can say, would it be all right if I reached out to 2 or 3 of my agent friends in this market and asked them to come talk to you about listing it? And if they say yes, great. And what you do is you talk to your agent friend and say, look, I'm going to lose this listing as of December 31st. I'd like to recommend your name to them. Should you get the listing, I'd like you to pay me a 25% referral fee. And there's nothing wrong with that. It helps to, at least maybe get some of your money out of everything that you've done. And you've got that, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of scenario that, I'll do the same for you. If you end up with an expired listing and you're going to lose it, there's nothing you can do about it, ask if you can refer some people. And then, if you get it, great. And what you're doing is you're hedging your bet. Because you might get 2 or 3 agents go do listing presentation for them, and so you got a better chance of one of them, being chosen. But again, in answer to your question, Charlie, it's April 30th is the day, midnight April 30th, and May 1st, they can go forward. Or, example, what we talked about earlier, they call you up and say, I've got a listing that expires December 31st, but I want to be back on the market on January 2nd. Can you come over and talk to me about how you would get my house sold versus what they've done? And it may be December 12th, it might be today. Well, you can't do anything until December 31st, but you can do paperwork. If they say, man, I really liked what you said, and my friend referred me to you, and if this thing doesn't sell, I'd really like to list with you after the first year. December 12th, commencing on January 2nd, 2018. Well, if it sells before that, well, then they terminate that before January 2nd. So that's another way that you would write this in and have something in writing where you're totally in accordance and compliance with, ethics and that kind of thing. Seller called you, you didn't try to call them and say, hey, I've seen your house been on the market for 168 days. You must be getting really frustrated. I'd like to come over and talk to you about how I can relieve that pain. How I can relieve that pain. That is an ethics violation, one called going beyond the sign. But there's nothing that says if somebody calls you up and says, I'm going to come over, or John calls me and says, hey, I got somebody who's not happy. That just happened to me yesterday. A builder was having coffee with a friend of his, and the friend connected me with the builder yesterday and said, this guy would like to talk to you about why his stuff isn't being marketed properly, and what you all would do in that situation. I'm happy to have coffee with that guy I talked to because they initiated it. I didn't do it.
And that's the main thing, right?
Comes
The
from
day
them first.
initiated, and not right behind the sign. How about pre-existing relationships where somehow somebody's got in there, and I ran up against that in a great place where I live, that's been on the market forever, it's now starting to get sliced up and diced. But I had pre-existing relations, so I could talk to them. But when they went to real estate for a while, and she came in here with me, Kathy Douglas, and it was, I kind of backed away. In fact, he even chased Sharon Donovan down because she's the listing broker, and said, look, I just know Kathy and Richard, I'm not trying to snake this.
Right. Yeah, so in that situation, he's got a pre-existing condition. Gap comes into the office. We laugh about it later because oh my gosh, you're a Wheeler, blah, blah, and I've got my house listed with Sharon Donovan, blah, blah, whoa, okay, fine, blah, blah, blah. And did the right thing. Hey, Sharon, I had this conversation with Kathy, blah, blah, I just want you to know that I wasn't in any way. But if Kathy had called Bob and said, I've got my listing with such and such, it's not going well, I'm thinking about making a change, he has every right to sit down with them. And if they're ready to do something right away, then you say, hey, you've got a listing that it doesn't expire until 31st of December or the 31st of January. Unless you terminate that agreement, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I can only do something as of February 1st. That doesn't mean that, but if you want to go back and talk to the other broker and hear your concerns, here's your dissatisfaction, I'd really like to get these things done. If they say we're not going to do them, well, then you have a right to ask to be terminated from it. And if they terminate from you, then I can talk to you prior to that.
That conversation with Sharon Donovan is all about cooperative brokerage. I'd love to have 3% of any of the sales of any of those pieces. So just sort of internal marketing while at the same time backing away and saying, hey, I understand what you're doing.
But I think even more than that, when those kind of things happen, you'll feel the hair stand up on the back of your head.
Yeah.
And you just make sure that you write down exactly what happened so that that other agent comes back and is all sideways. Hey, wait a minute. On such and such a date, this person contacted me. Here's the email that I got. This was not initiated by me. Here's the chain of events. So anyway, but it can happen. It's April 30th. They can do it May 1st. And if they do it May 1st, then all bets are off with everything else unless you've got some exclusions, okay? For purposes of agreement, if any offer is presented to owner, let me just say one other thing. So you're getting a listing, but they have a couple people that they think are interested. They've told people they're thinking about putting their house on the market. You say, when you do, let me know, right? So they come to you, they're gonna put their house on the market. This happens a lot of times with land. that the neighbor is interested in buying it. If I ever sell it, they would like to, blah, blah, blah. And so they want to be excluded, or they want the commission to be changed because they've already got somebody in their back pocket, right? All that's great, but I'd only give them 30 days. Don't write it in as exclusion that is until Christ comes back, right? With no termination date. No, I'm serious. You've been in this thing 6 months and done all this marketing and everything, and all of a sudden this person comes in and writes a contract and you're out of nothing.
Wait it out.
So you say, Bob, I totally agree, and you should have every right to do that. So what I like to do is get this listing agreement signed, commencing on such and such a date. But in the other terms, on page, whatever it is, 5 of 6 or 6 of 6, on other terms on page 6 of 6, Bill and Mary Smith, should Bill and Mary Smith buy this property or enter into a contract to buy this property by January 15, 2018, this listing agreement is terminated. And what you do is you sell it, if you will, to say, Bob, and the reason for this is you want to create a sense of urgency of these people. They really want to buy it. You want to tell them they're on the clock, right? And going back to legal owners, the other reason checking the tax records of the kind of things, there may be in some situations somebody has bought the right of first refusal, and it's recorded in the deed. And so you're trying to sell it, but all of a sudden, well, no, wait, if you're selling it, this person has the right of first
So in
refusal.
that case, if Bob and Mary do buy it in that 30 days,
You're out.
You're out.
That's right. They entered into the contract prior to January 15, 2018. You're out, no harm, no foul. The problem is people don't think about it that way and they just write it in. And that thing is there just open-ended. That's the last. Everything you want to do should have a termination. Any type of contingency, anything that's subject to, everything should have a place where, this is the date that the Lord has made, and whatever.
On this day.
As an example, just yesterday I talked to an agent about a home inspection. And in the home inspection contingency, and I'm getting a little bit off track, but it's the same kind of thing. Home inspection contingency, and I think, Charlotte, we may have talked about this a little bit with yours. The seller had 3 days to respond, right? So the buyer provided them the HRCA, the home inspection, repair, condition, whatever. And there were 3 things that they wanted done. The seller didn't sign it. They sent an email back saying we're going to take care of these things, but not specifically in the way that the HRCA had written it, right? So the agent came to me yesterday and said, what's my deal? And I said, well, your deal is, are you beyond the notification period? Because once I give this information to the seller,
Done your duty.
no, the seller now has 3 days to respond. And what the home inspection contingency says, if the seller doesn't respond in those 3 days, or in this situation, respond by email, the buyer now has 3 days to either accept what they've done or come back. And what, thankfully, the guy asked the question was when I did my homework on it, he had 1 more day because the HRCA wasn't really signed properly. The seller, with negotiations, sent an email saying, I'm going to do this, but wasn't clear on this one specific thing, had to do with the fire.
Was it an accident? Did the seller do it accidentally?
I don't think so. Not knowing the agent, knowing the agent, I don't think so. So, thankfully, I was able to voicemail our agent back and realized, hey, you still got a day. So he was able to go back and say, hey, I need that HRCA signed, or this home inspection contingency is still in effect. Because what the contract says, the home inspection says if you don't, the home inspection contingency is hereby removed and the contract's in full force and effect.
Period.
Yeah. Now, again, we're getting sidetracked, but still, I said the good news is that if you go to the home inspection contingency, you probably still have the right to deal with it in the walkthrough, the equipment condition walkthrough at the time of closing, because those were things that weren't noted and agreed that they didn't care about. So they can go back and say, hey, these are the 3 things we asked. I still think they had a place, but thankfully we still had this 1 day where they could go back in and like I was talking about staying out of the gray. This was a staying out of the gray. Like going back in again, it started the clock again for the seller versus the buyer being. Now, if the seller doesn't respond in 3 days, it's the other. That it's been accepted and so forth. You were going to say something.
Well, so the HRCA is the form that we send saying these are the things that we want.
It's home inspection, repair. So I forget what the C and the A for, but that's what.
Yeah. So the mistake that I made in this, was that I just sent an email to Susie saying, these are what we need to have done. And then she asked for the report from the Jessica Justin. So then she said, well, you need to do this form. So obviously, I'm the one who needs to do that, not her.
Right. So the home inspection is done. You represent the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to the home inspector, talk to the client, and say, these are the things we need done. And more importantly, you don't just say, gutter on southeast side of the house is loose. You say, gutter on southeast house is to be repaired
Right.
by a licensed and insured contractor. You know, dining room ceiling needs to be, there's a stain on the dining room ceiling. Well, yeah, there is. So you need to say, seller agrees to sand and spackle and repaint in the same color. I mean, you need to be specific. If you just say seller agrees to paint ceiling, well, I can do that and it'll look terrible because I'm a terrible painter. Or I can just say, okay, let's really have some fun. This is white. Let's paint it pink in that one little place. And I've complied with what was said. So when you do the HERCA, you want to be very specific. Seller agrees to repair, replace, blah, blah, blah. Seller agrees. You don't want to just list things.
These are actually new
So
terms to the
So the days in the contract, we had 5 days, yes, months, okay? So it didn't start ticking until I sent the HERCA. Even though I sent the email the day before,
Right.
it doesn't start until I actually.
That's exactly right. All right, so then for purposes of the agreement, if any offer is presented to owner within the initial period of time or any extension thereof, but I is accepted by owner after expiration of the initial period of time or extension thereof, or 2, owner make a counteroffer which is accepted by purchaser after the expiration of the initial time or extension thereof, owner shall pay broker the fee as if the property had been sold during the initial period of time or extension thereof. So again, back to application, it's December 12th, it's expiring December 13th, it's 31st. Even if you get a contract, it's not going to close until February or whatever. This clause says that I'm still going to get paid, even though all that happened. As long as it all gets done during the time, not done, gets initiated. So let's just say a contract comes in on this property that we've been talking about on December 30th. Got holidays, snows 6 inches, whatever. And they don't ratify it till January 4th. Listing agent's still covered in that situation. The other thing that's important is that happens, your expiration is December 31st. You'll need to go into the MLS and change your expiration date from December 31st to February 28th or whenever it is that it's going to close. Because if not, on January 1st, that thing's going to show up on the hot sheet as expired, and everybody's going to be calling and saying, are you thinking about relisting with somebody else? Blah, blah, blah. You have the right to change that to the date that you have as far as the expected settlement date. Now, to get something from the seller that says, I'm going to change this from December 31st to February 28th, due to the fact that that's when it's going to close, that suffices. But what this is saying is if it gets started prior to the expiration date, then you're still in control of this listing until that particular transaction doesn't work out. Okay? All right, B, and this is important. So this is one of those, elementary math problems, all right? If you put in 6% up here at the top, or what I don't want you to do is, let's say you've got a 6% listing. Some agents put in 3% up here because they think that's the listing fee. And then they put 3% down here because they think this is the buyer's fee. When you do that, you're getting paid 0. Because this is the total commission up here. And then what we're going to do as the listing broker is we're going to offer compensation out to another agent. So this needs to be 6 up here and 3 here. It needs to be 7 here and 3 here. So 4% is going to go to listing, 3%. Whatever it is, whatever you're going to offer out to the buyer agent, that's what's going in B. All right, so that's just the first thing to remember. Total commission in A, what you're going to offer to the buyer. And the total commission in A minus what you offer to the buyer is what the listing fee is going to be. Okay? So the broker has advised, has advised owner of broker's firm policy regarding cooperating with and compensating other real estate licensees. Owner authorizes broker to cooperate with and compensate other brokers via the following. Check, 3% of the gross sales price, or blank, a flat fee. Now, Where you'll see the flat fee more times than not is with rentals. Right? This isn't a rental one, this is a sell, but it's the same language, exclusive authorization. If you're going to lease something, then oftentimes you're going to put $100 in here, or $250 or whatever. You know what some people with the rental, 3% of the gross rental price. So $2,000 a month, $24,000. That means you got 6%. 6% is $14,400, right? And you're going to offer 25% of that or something down here. But anyway, but the point being is really the only place you're really going to see a flat fee most times is on the rental side. Normally you're going to see 3% or 2.5% or whatever of the gross sales price. Now, interestingly enough, see how that sum of such compensation shall be paid by owner and settlement, period. See that where it goes to period right underneath the gross sales price? Important thing about this is one thing, this is something that most agents don't understand. Because let's just say you list a house for $400,000 and it sells for $400,000. But the seller is going to pay 3% in closing costs to the buyer, right? That's $12,000. Yeah, $12,000. So effectively, that's a net price of $388,000. They offered him $400,000, got accepted, but the seller's going to pay the buyer's closing costs up to 3%. Some agents say we're only paying commission on the $388,000. Okay? They're only going to do that if in other terms they say it. And in the other remarks in the MLS, they say it. Because when I get this conversation with agents, they say, well, we always pay on the net. Show me in your listing agreement where it says that's what you're supposed to do. Because it doesn't. It says 3% of the gross sales price, not net sales price, gross sales price.
So what is the standard gross?
Well, most people will do gross, but there are agents out there that their standard
I've seen that.
is we're paying sellers.
Yeah, you see it as a
Seller concession.
Right. And as long as that's in the remarks, that's fine because you're notifying the agents if that's the case. Now, the other problem is a lot of agents don't pay attention to the remarks. And so therefore, they don't see that till after the fact. They also don't pay attention to the gross percentage. So somebody lists a house for 5% and they offer 50% of it to the buyer agent. So now it's only 2.5%, right? So if you don't know that and you go into that property and you write a contract, way too late to renegotiate that. What you need to do is if you're searching through if that's important to you, then you want to look at the broker buyer compensations, and if there's one that's 2.5 or less than what you had, and that's going to be important when we get to another place here. You need to go to that listing agent and say, hey, I have an agreement with my buyer that I'm going to be paying 3%. My buyer understands that whatever the seller offers is going to go toward that. You're only offering 2.5%. So what I'm asking is, if I bring you an acceptable offer,
I so apologize. I had the wrong time on this thing.
If I bring you an acceptable offer, are you willing to pay me 3%? And again, this is another place where the agents don't get it. The agent says, well, I have to talk to my owner. And your answer very nicely is to say, well, actually you don't. Well, wait a minute. Well, in your listing agreement, you've got a total commission already in. You've already agreed to your seller as to what they're going to pay you if you sell this. You've decided that I'm only worth 2.5%. I'm telling you that I'm going to show a lot of different properties out in this marketplace. And I need to know that if I bring you an acceptable offer, you're going to pay me 3%, which means you're going to get less. I get that.
Yeah.
But the point being is that this is the agreement I have with my buyer. And you need to do that prior to showing the property and for sure before you ever write a contract, because the regulations say that commission on both the listing side and the buyer side cannot be negotiated after a contract's been written.
Yeah, that's payola after the fact, kickbacks, we'll work it out on the next one. You might hear that. That's all scamming contracting. Oh, we'll make it up on the next.
So anyway, the point being is total commission up here in A, what I'm going to offer the buyer here in B. If for you as an agent working with the buyer, if that's not enough for you, you need to work that out prior to doing that. Now, the other thing is, let's say you get into a contract and you're the listing agent, you come to me and say, hey, we've got a contract at 400,000, but the owner really wants 410. I've gotten them up to, this buyer was at 380, we've got them to 400, but we're $10,000 apart, and it just doesn't seem like there's any more to give. Right, well, the first thing I would tell you, if you come to me as a listing agent, is to say, well, you got 10,000 to find, right? Right. And you're asking me, should we give up any? My answer is not yet. However, you might try, if you really feel like it's done and it's not going any farther, you might try to say to your seller, if I can work this out, are you willing to go at 407.5 versus 410? The seller says, yeah, I'm willing to do that. So then you can go to, now this is on the listing side, and we'll talk about the buyer side. I can go to Michael and say, man, I don't know what we can do. I think I can get my seller to get to 407.5, but that's as close as we're getting to 400. Got any ideas? And Michael, who's been offered 3% down here, can say to me at that point, well, how about if I get my buyer up $2,500? I'll chip in $2,500. Would you be willing to do that? So now everybody has felt the pain of it, right? And you get it to work. And the point being is the buyer agent has to bring it up. I can't say to him, hey, we're at $7,500 apart. Are you willing to reduce your commission? Because I've offered 3% in the MLS. I can't do that. The buyer agent can offer it because he's been given it. He can say, hey, I'm willing to waive this. Or, sometimes like for instance, you decide to buy your own house. Our company has a policy that we're going to give you that commission, except for a $500 administration fee once you've been with the company for a bit and had some sales. So you can say, I don't want that 3%, and you get a letter from me that says I authorize the fact that you don't want that. You can negotiate that 3% into closing cost or sales price or whatever the case may be. But the point being is that I can't start that from the listing side. I have to get the agent to come up with that on their own.
So is this a common tactic? Like you're almost waiting for the selling agent to say you got any ideas kind of thing, and that's your.
No, I think the common tactic is that as soon as it gets to a place where nobody can move, both buyer and seller look at the agents and say, "What you got in your wallet?"
That's what I mean.
Yeah, they're gonna try for you to solve the problem. Now, it doesn't have to get there. I mean, it is kind of a he who blinks, first kind of thing. But if you understand, going through this gives you the information you need to be able to do this well.
Got it.
Right?
My other question is it common for a $400,000 deal to be lost over 10 grand?
Not common, but it does happen. I've seen a $400,000 deal lost over a washer and dryer.
Yeah, people start to take it personally.
And the deals get in, I've given way too much, and I'm not giving up anymore. Somehow the buyer is ticked off the seller. They say, I don't want to buy this house anymore. Screw them kind of thing. And my response in that situation, if John was my buyer, I said, John, I get it. I understand why you're frustrated, but here's the good news.
After you sell.
Christ is born. No, here's the good news. The good news is when you buy this house, they're moving out.
They're out of your life.
If this was meaning you have to move in with them, I get it. I understand why you'd be upset. You wouldn't like them, they like that or not, but they're going to be gone. It's going to be your house turned into a home. And is it willing to cut your nose off, spite your face for that particular reason? But the key to this, just in talking about the listing agreement, is exactly that you've got total commission at the top, and now you're offering what's out there. So the owner acknowledges that the cooperating fee set forth in this paragraph represents an obligation of, here you go.
You know what, I had these from last time.
That's right there.
Thanks.
We're on
Excuse me, is the point to start going over this contract?
3B. What's that?
A paragraph at a time?
This is the listing agreement, not the contract. But yes, we're going to get through this, and then we'll probably start back up. Let's see. Owner acknowledges, I'm on the 1, 2, 3, 4th line. Owner acknowledges that the cooperating fee set forth in this paragraph represents an obligation to a broker, to a selling broker per MLS rules, we just talked about that, and agrees that the owner is responsible to pay this amount to broker as part of the fee. which will then be paid to the cooperating broker. So again, part of the fee, that's the line, right? 6% up here, total commission, X percent of the gross value is part of the fee, the part of the fee that's not up here, which will then be paid by the cooperating broker. Owner understands the responsibility for the payment of cooperating broker's compensation may be determined as a result of civil action or arbitration or a separate agreement between broker and cooperating broker claiming such fee, provided, however, such fee shall not exceed the amount set forth in this paragraph 3B without consent of the owner. So that line is if it becomes an issue where John Green is the person who brought the buyer, but Bob Bollinger thinks he was the one who really got that buyer to like that house, and that's what's called procuring cause, okay? We're not gonna get into that now, but that's what this is about. But if somebody else, what's that?
I have to take Bob out of that.
That's right, you're gonna take Bob out at that point, that's right, but not until the listing expires. No, but the point being is, that would be worked out after the fact, and what this is saying is that us, the listing company that's getting the total commission, once somebody decided in arbitration or whatever how that was to be paid, we would be responsible for doing that. Being responsible for doing that means we may have to go back to the other agent and get their money back, which is not fun. It doesn't happen very often, but that's what that's for. Owner agrees to participate fully at owner's sole expense in any legal action or arbitration proceedings that may arise with respect to the compensation due a cooperating broker. So what that's saying is that if, for whatever reason, a buyer withdraws from the contract for no reason, and that agent did bring us a ready, willing, and able buyer, and the owner is trying to get that person to close on the property, that they're going to help and pay legal expenses to make that happen. In all honesty, practical application of that, in most situations, if the thing falls apart, the release gets signed and earnest money gets returned, we're not getting any of it. With the hope that we're going to relist it and get paid. So because it can be like just yesterday, it was one with $500 or $1,000, and the seller said, I'm not going to sign the release, and they didn't need to. But unless the buyer was willing to give them $1,000, well, $1,000, we're not going to, say to the seller, hey, we want $60.
Yeah.
That's the only compensation they got out of that situation. And so, in more times than not, the exception is when you go after somebody rather than the rule, and it's usually because the seller has defaulted.
Yeah.
The seller at the last minute says, "I'm not selling this house to these people anymore."
And it's bad faith. And
Right. Owner shall identify and hold broker harmless from any monetary loss suffered by broker due to award against broker arising from the owner's non-payment of compensation that is due to a cooperating broker as a result of the sale of the property. So the owner identifying and holding harmless from any monetary loss suffered by the broker due to any award against broker arising from the owner's non-payment of compensation that is due. So in other words, they didn't pay it for whatever reason, they go to closing and they paid us, but they didn't authorize their attorney to pay the other. That agent obviously is not happy now, they're gonna come after us. And what this is saying is we're no harm, no foul. It wasn't our fault that you didn't pay it. That's what that line's talking about there. Owner agrees not to negotiate broker's fee or any purchaser, agent, representative's compensation or real estate sales contract for property. There it is. Owner agrees not to negotiate broker's fee or any purchaser, agent, representative's compensation of real estate. So they're agreeing that they didn't get their price, therefore we want a lower commission. They're agreeing that they're not going to do that, but they still do it. At the end of the day, they still come and look at us. But we can point them back to 3B and say, look, we're doing our best to get you the best price possible. We've marketed, we've done blah, blah, blah. This isn't our fault that you can't get 410. We've done everything we can. And here's
Did you ever hold them to that and just say, hey, look, this is yours, and then they eat it?
No, what you say is, you either accept the 400 or these people are walking away, or we can go back in at 402 and see if they'll do it at 402 or 410 or whatever. But if you technically, they can't say to you, I want to take this offer and I want you to send it back to them, reducing my commission, because they've already agreed that they can't do that.
yeah, it's
And
two
you may
separate
use it.
contracts.
You may use it as a strategy, but they can't do it. This obligation shall survive expiration or earlier termination of the agreement and settlement of the sale of the property. I think we're gonna stop there. It's 10:35. We'll finish on the end of page 1. Any questions about that? Is that, I know it's new language, but does that, hopefully that helps you kind of get started in regards to understanding. The big thing in this situation is that total, and then this over here is not the same. It's total plus what you're gonna offer the buyer. And then again, we've talked a little bit already about the termination stuff.
I apologize for coming in.
No worries.
I don't know
You
why I
can,
had this down to 10:30 or 11:30.
you can watch it online.
You can have your donuts anyway.
Yeah, right.
I'm forgetting that.
Oh, now last thing, yeah, that you can watch them online.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then we-
remind you every week.
Exactly, I just need to get it, but when we give information, we've all done it, names and stuff, or deals and targets, this is sensitive. Now it's on YouTube, so.
Okay, just so you know, this is just, again, from a processing standpoint, these are the things that when you have a listing, you're gonna need to provide a listing information sheet, a listing agreement, disclosure, disclaimer. We're gonna go through all these. Lead-based paint, you're gonna verify that it was built after 1978, or if it was before, you're gonna have something that shows that we've acknowledged that. The waiver acceptance of a home warranty, I feel very strongly that the seller should have a home warranty. If they don't want it, we have a form that we get them to sign that says that they're not interested in it. And we'll talk about that as we go through it too. And then if possible, a plat or tax map. If you don't have it, that's fine. But if you have it,
You can get it, it's railroad transaction desk, then, right?
if there's one available. I mean, this is your listing. So it's not gonna be in the listing until you've put it in the transaction desk. So when you go to get a listing, you can say, do you have the most current survey on this property? And oftentimes they don't know, and you say, well, do you have a file from when you bought the property? Well, actually, yes, I kept track of that. But let's look through that and see. And oftentimes there is something in there. All right?
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
thank you, guys.
I know.
Good
Thank
stuff. Just close it.